Ever wondered if your ancestors were publicly auctioned off for marriage, like precious cargo? Could a random lottery decide who you'd spend a whole festival with? Maybe even your life? What if failing to marry by a certain age meant facing a noisy, mocking mob outside your very own window, just for being single? And can you imagine a time when sacred eels in a holy well could reveal to an eager unmarried girl the secrets of her romantic future? These aren't tales from fiction. They are echoes of real events, forgotten festivals and rituals that once shaped the lives of the unmarried. Number 7. The Mummers Masquerade of Matrimony. In the heart of winter, when the night stretched long and the fields lay fallow, communities across the British Isles and parts of Europe would stir with an ancient energy. This was the time of the Mummers plays, a tradition whose roots dig deep into the soil of pre-Christian ritual, yet which blossomed anew each year, particularly from the medieval period through to the 19th century, and in some places even to this day. While these plays varied wildly from village to village, many shared a common vital thread: a dramatic portrayal of courtship, conflict, death, and revival, often culminating in a symbolic marriage. For the unmarried young men and women of the parish, these performances were far more than simple entertainment. They were a vibrant, living spectacle that placed the themes of love, union, and the continuation of life 70 front and center, often performed by the unmarried men themselves. Imagine a small village, dusted with snow, the windows of cottages glowing warmly against the encroaching dark. A hush falls over the assembled crowd, perhaps gathered in a large farmhouse kitchen, the main room of the local inn, or even out in the frosty air of the village square. The mummers arrive, a troop of local lads, their faces often disguised with soot, paint, or elaborate homemade masks. Their costumes were a motley collection: strips of paper, tattered ribbons, animal skins, or character-specific attire, like the tall hat of the doctor or the exaggerated finery of the noble captain. These weren't professional actors. They were plowboys, artisans, and laborers, transformed for the night into figures of myth and drama. For many of these young unmarried men, performing in the mummers' play was a rite of passage, a chance to step outside their everyday roles and command the attention of their community, especially the eligible young women watching intently. The play itself would unfold, a strange and compelling mix of rhyming couplets, boastful speeches, and mock combat. Characters like St. George or a local hero would battle a Turkish knight, a slasher, or some other villain. Comical doctor would arrive to revive the slain hero with a magic potion, his patter filled with outlandish claims and local jokes. But woven into many of these dramas was a courtship subplot. King or a noble captain might woo a lady, sometimes encountering resistance, sometimes winning her over with bold declarations or feats of valor. The dialogue, though often crudely poetic, would speak directly to the aspirations and anxieties surrounding love and marriage. The lady might express her desire for a brave and true partner, while the suitor would pledge his undying affection. For the unmarried women in the audience, these scenes were particularly resonant. They watched young men they knew, perhaps men they secretly admired or had danced with at a previous harvest festival, enacting these universal themes. The symbolic marriage at the end of the play, where the hero and heroine joined hands, was a powerful image. It reinforced the societal expectation of marriage as a natural and desirable outcome, a happy ending to be strived for. The festive atmosphere surrounding the play, the shared laughter, the collective gasp at the mock battle, the cheer at the revival, all of this created a charged environment where social barriers might temporarily lower. After the performance, the mummers would often collect money or refreshments. This was a time for mingling. The disguised performers, emboldened by their roles and the anonymity of their masks, might engage in playful banter with the young women. A glance, a shared smile, a whispered comment could be the spark that ignited a real-life courtship. The themes of the play lingered in the air, making conversations about love and future prospects feel more natural, less forced. The unmarried men, having colgated their vigor and wit through the performance, were seen in a new light. The unmarried women, having witnessed these dramatic portrayals of romance, might feel their own hopes and dreams for partnership stirred. The Mummers plays, therefore, served as an indirect but potent festival for the unmarried. They didn't just celebrate marriage in the abstract, they brought the unmarried together, providing a shared cultural experience that was rich with romantic symbolism. Plays provided a stage, both literal and metaphorical, for the display of masculine prowess and for the communal acknowledgement of courtship rituals. They offered a safe and entertaining context for the unmarried to observe and participate in the age-old dance of attraction and pairing. While not exclusively for the unmarried in the sense of a direct matchmaking event, their content, the typical age of the performers, and the social opportunities they created made them a significant, if subtle, institution in the social lives of single people. Over time, as village life changed, as new forms of entertainment emerged, and as societal views on courtship evolved, the widespread practice of these specific wooing-centric mummers plays began to fade in many areas, becoming a cherished folk memory rather than a living, breathing catalyst for connection among the unattached. Number 6. The Viennese flower balls of fleeting romance. In the glittering heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, 19th century, Vienna was a city of waltzes, coffee houses, and an almost dizzying array of social rituals. Especially during the Fasching or Carnival season, among the most eagerly anticipated events for the city's elite were the Blumen Ball, the flower balls. These were not just any dances, they were exquisite, fragrant affairs, specifically designed and universally understood as prime marriage markets for the sons and daughters of the aristocracy and the wealthy bourgeoisie. For an unmarried young lady of society, a successful season of flower balls could mean securing a desirable husband and, with him, her future. For a young bachelor, these were opportunities to survey the available talent, make advantageous connections, and perhaps find a bride who met the stringent requirements of his family and social standing. Picture the opulent ballrooms of a Viennese palace, vast spaces lit by hundreds of flickering candles and crystal chandeliers, the light reflecting off polished marble floors and gilded mirrors. The air would be heavy with the scent of thousands upon thousands of fresh flowers, roses, lilies, violets, camellias, arranged in breathtaking displays, cascading from balconies, adorning tables, and woven into elaborate garlands. These weren't mere decorations, they were an integral part of the ball's identity and its romantic allure. Young debutantes, often in their late teens or early 20s, would arrive adorned in gowns of white or pale pastels, their hair intricately styled, perhaps with a few carefully chosen blossoms tucked into their curls. Their dance cards, tiny, ornate booklets, would be clutched expectantly. Unmarried gentlemen, dapper in their evening attire, would be assessing the room, their eyes scanning for beauty, grace, and importantly, dowries and connections. The flower balls were highly structured events. Upon arrival, a young lady, usually chaperoned by her mother or another older female relative, would be formally presented. The music, often provided by renowned orchestras, led by composers like Johann Strauss himself, would strike up a waltz, and the dance floor would fill with swirling couples. The dance card was a crucial tool for the unmarried. A young woman's popularity could be gauged by how quickly her card filled with the names of prospective partners for each dance, the waltz, the polka, the quadrille. To be left with too many empty slots was a quiet social humiliation, a sign that one was not attracting sufficient interest. For the young men, the etiquette of asking for a dance, of making polite conversation during the brief intervals, of subtly inquiring about a lady's family and interests, was a carefully learned art. Beyond the dancing, the flower balls offered other avenues for interaction. Supper would be served a lavish affair, providing opportunities for more extended conversations at small tables. Quiet alcoves decorated with yet more flowers might offer a moment of relative privacy for a couple to exchange a few words away from the throng, always under the watchful eyes of chaperones. The flowers themselves played a role in the unspoken language of courtship. A gentleman might present a lady with a single perfect bloom, a gesture imbued with meaning. The Blumenspende, a gift of flowers presented to each lady, was a traditional highlight. For the unmarried, these balls were a period of intense excitement, anxiety, and hope. A young woman knew she was on display, her every movement, word, and smile scrutinized. Pressure to be charming, witty, and accomplished was immense. A successful ball could lead to invitations for other social engagements, walks in the Prater, visits to the opera, and ultimately, a proposal of marriage. An unsuccessful evening could mean disappointment and the fear of being overlooked. For the bachelors, while perhaps under less overt pressure, there was still the expectation to find a suitable match, one that would enhance their family's status and fortune. They too were being evaluated by sharp-eyed mothers and prospective fathers-in-law. The flower balls were, in essence, a highly ritualized and exclusive festival of matchmaking for the upper echelons of Viennese society. They celebrated youth, beauty, and the promise of advantageous unions. While ostensibly about pleasure and gaiety, their underlying purpose was deadly serious: the continuation of lineages, the consolidation of wealth, and the maintenance of social order. They provided a controlled environment where the unmarried children of the elite could meet, interact, and form attachments under the careful supervision of their families. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, and as societal norms around marriage and courtship began to shift, the overt marriage market aspect of such balls gradually softened, though their romantic and social significance lingered. The grand flower balls of old, in their specific capacity as exclusive hunting grounds for husbands and wives, became a fragrant, waltz-filled memory of a bygone era of structured romance. Number 5. Lupercalia's Lottery of Love and Lashes. Deep in the Roman midwinter, around the 15th of February, the ancient city of Rome would erupt in a festival far removed from the solemn rituals of state or the dignified proceedings of the Senate. This was Lupercalia, a wild, primal, and deeply enigmatic celebration, ostensibly for fertility and purification, but one that held a particular and rather startling significance for the city's unmarried youth. While its origins are shrouded in mystery, stretching back to Rome's pastoral beginnings, by the late Republic and early Empire, one of its most talked-about features was a form of matchmaking lottery that temporarily paired unmarried men and women alongside a ritual that saw young men nearly naked, playfully whipping women to bestow fertility. Imagine the scene near the Lupercal, the sacred cave on the Palatine Hill, where Romulus and Remus were said to have been suckled by the she-wolf. The festival would begin with a sacrifice of goats and a dog by the Luperci, the priests of the god Lupercus, who was often identified with Faunus, a rustic deity of shepherds. Two young men of noble birth, also Luperci, would have their foreheads touched with the bloody sacrificial knife, and the blood then wiped away with wool soaked in milk, after which they were required to laugh. This strange opening set the tone for what was to follow. The Luperci would then cut thongs called febrois from the skins of the sacrificed goats. Clad only in girdles made from these same skins, or perhaps entirely naked, they would feast and drink wine. Then came the part that directly involved the unmarried people of Rome, particularly its young women. The Luperci, exhilarated and perhaps a little intoxicated, would run through the streets of the city. In their hands, they carried the goatskin thongs. As they ran, they would strike any woman who came near them. Far from avoiding these blows, many women, especially those who were childless or wished to conceive, would eagerly place themselves in the path of the runners. It was believed that a lash from the sacred fibra would ensure fertility and ease childbirth. For young unmarried women, this aspect of the festival, while perhaps a little alarming by modern standards, was also imbued with the hope of future motherhood, a key component of a successful marriage in Roman society. But it was another, less boisterous, but equally significant custom associated with Lupercalia that directly targeted the unmarried population for pairing. In the days leading up to or during the festival, the names of teenage girls were written on slips of parchment and placed into a jar. Young unmarried men would then draw a name from the jar. The girl whose name was drawn would be his companion for the duration of the festival, and sometimes, according to some accounts, for the entire following year. This was, in effect, a grand public lottery of love, or at least companionship. Consider the anticipation and trepidation this must have generated among the unmarried youth. A young woman would know her name was in that jar, her fate for the festival, and possibly beyond, resting on chance. Would she be paired with someone handsome, kind, or from a good family? Or would she draw someone less desirable? For the young men, there was a similar gamble. Pairing was public, and the couple was expected to spend time together, attending the festival's events, perhaps sharing meals and conversations. It was a socially sanctioned opportunity for young unmarried people to get to know each other intimately, outside the usual more restrictive social conventions that governed interactions between the sexes. While some of these festival pairings were undoubtedly temporary, lasting only as long as the Lupercalia celebrations, it was widely hoped, and often the case, that genuine affection would blossom. These lottery-drawn partnerships could, and did, lead to lasting relationships and eventual marriage. Lupercalia, therefore, provided a unique mechanism for matchmaking. It bypassed parental arrangements, at least initially, and introduced an element of random chance and personal discovery into the process of finding a partner. It celebrated youthful desire and the forging of new bonds within the community. For the unmarried, it was a period of heightened emotion, social possibility, and a direct engagement with the themes of fertility and union, all under the somewhat chaotic and carnivalesque atmosphere of one of Rome's oldest festivals. As Christianity spread, the overtly pagan and licentious aspects of Lupercalia, including its matchmaking, lottery, and ritual whipping, were increasingly frowned upon, and the festival was eventually suppressed in the late 5th century, its unique focus on pairing the unmarried relegated to the annals of history. Number 4. The cacophony of charivari for unwed elders. Across medieval and early modern Europe, from the rustic villages of France to the bustling towns of England and Germany, a peculiar and often intimidating form of community justice would periodically erupt, aimed squarely at those who deviated from societal norms, particularly in matters of marriage and household. This was the charivari, known by various names like Skimmington Ride in England, Katzenmusik in German-speaking lands, or Censurada in Spain. While charivari could target adulterers, wife-beaters, or mismatched couples, one of its consistent targets, in certain regions and times, was the confirmed bachelor or the old maid, individuals who remained stubbornly unmarried beyond what the community considered an acceptable age. For these unmarried individuals, the charivari was not a celebration, but a noisy, public, and deeply humiliating ordeal designed to pressure them into conforming to the marital ideal. Imagine a small, tightly knit community where everyone knew everyone else's business. A man perhaps in his late 30s or 40s, who had shown no inclination to take a wife, or a woman of similar age who had refused all suitors, or simply never received a suitable offer, might find themselves the focus of communal disapproval. This disapproval wouldn't always manifest as quiet gossip. It could explode into the ritualized mockery of the charivari. The festival, if such a term can be applied to what was essentially a form of public shaming, would often take place at night. crowd, typically composed of young men, but sometimes involving a broader section of the community, would gather outside the unfortunate individual's house. The sounds would begin first. An unholy din, a cacophony of rough music, designed to grate on the nerves and announce the community's displeasure to the entire neighborhood. People would bang on pots and pans, blow crude horns, ring cowbells, shout, and whistle. This was the rough music, the auditory assault that defined the charivari. The lyrics of shouted songs or chants would often be specific to the individual being targeted, mocking their single status, perhaps inventing comical reasons for their failure to marry, or accusing them of being selfish or unnatural for remaining unwed. Sometimes, the charivari involved more than just noise. Effigies of the targeted bachelor or spinster might be paraded through the streets and then burned or ritually drowned. In a Skimmington ride, for instance, a man might ride a donkey backwards holding a distaff to symbolize effeminate or henpecked behavior, while another person, often a man dressed as a woman, would pretend to beat him. While this specific scenario was more common for other marital transgressions, the element of public spectacle and ridicule was central. The unmarried person, cowering inside their home, would hear the jeers, the insults, the relentless noise, often for hours, sometimes for successive nights. There was little they could do but endure it. The authorities often turned a blind eye, viewing charivari as a form of traditional, informal social control. The purpose of such a festival of targeting was clear: to enforce the communal expectation that adults should marry and form households. Marriage was seen as essential for social stability, economic prosperity, and the continuation of the community. Unmarried individuals, especially those perceived as willfully remaining so, to be seen as shirking their duty, as being somehow incomplete or even a burden. The charivari aimed to make their unmarried status so uncomfortable, so publicly shameful, that they would be driven to seek a spouse. It was a stark message that their private choice was a public concern. For the bachelor or spinster subjected to this, the experience would have been deeply distressing. It was an attack on their dignity, a public stripping of their privacy, and a forceful reminder of their perceived inadequacy in the eyes of their neighbors. While some might have remained defiant, the social pressure was immense. The fear of a repeat performance, the daily embarrassment of facing those who had participated in the mockery, could be a powerful motivator. The charivari served as a stark reminder that in many pre-modern societies, the unmarried state, particularly when prolonged, was not a neutral personal choice, but a social anomaly that could invite severe communal sanction. As societies modernized, as individualism grew, and as formal legal systems became more robust, these kinds of folk justice rituals, like the charivari, gradually declined. Though the underlying social pressures on the unmarried to marry certainly did not disappear overnight. The loud, clangorous nights of targeted shaming faded into a less raucous, but perhaps still palpable, societal expectation. Number 3. The Whispering Well of St. Dwynwen's Eels. On the wild and beautiful shores of Ynyslan Dwyn, a small tidal island off the coast of Anglesey in Wales, lies the spiritual heart of Welsh romance, the ruined church and holy well of St. Dwynwen, the Welsh patron saint of lovers. Celebrated on January 25th, St. Dwynwen's Day has long been a time for lovers to exchange tokens of affection, much like Valentine's Day elsewhere. However, for centuries, it was also a place of pilgrimage, particularly for unmarried young women seeking not just love, but divine insight into their romantic futures, all thanks to the supposed prophetic powers of sacred eels or fish said to inhabit Dwynwen's well, Hinnan Dwynwen. This wasn't a grand, boisterous festival, but a more intimate, personal ritual, exclusively focused on the hopes and anxieties of those yet to find their match. The legend of Saint Dwynwen herself is a poignant one. 5th-century princess, she fell deeply in love with a young man named Melon Daffodil. However, her father had already arranged for her to marry someone else. Distraught, Dwynwen prayed to be released from her love for Melon. An angel appeared, gave her a potion that turned Melon into a block of ice, and then granted Dwynwen 3 wishes. Her first wish was that Melon be thawed. Her second, that God meet the hopes and dreams of true lovers. And her third, that she should never again wish to be married. She then retreated to the solitude of Landwyn Island, to live as a hermit, dedicating her life to prayer and contemplation, becoming a spiritual guide for those with troubled hearts. Her well, Finan Dwynwen became the focal point for those seeking her intercession, especially unmarried girls yearning for love or reassurance about a potential suitor. The ritual itself was simple yet deeply imbued with belief. A young woman, her heart full of questions, would approach the stone-lined well. She might offer a small token, perhaps a coin or a piece of bread cast upon the waters, as she whispered her prayers to Saint Dwynwen. Key to the divination lay in the behavior of the sacred eels or fish that were believed to live within the well's cool, clear waters. Imagine a young woman perhaps having traveled many miles on foot or by simple cart, finally reaching this wind-swept, sacred spot. She would peer intently into the water, her breath held in anticipation. If the eels were seen to be active, swimming vigorously, it was considered a very good omen, signifying luck in love and a faithful partner. If they moved in a particular way, or towards a certain side of the well after a specific question was posed, this too would be interpreted. Some traditions held that if the fish disturbed the surface of the water while the girl was looking in, her beloved was true. If the water remained still, or if the eels were sluggish or hidden, it could be taken as a sign of disappointment to come, or perhaps that her current sweetheart was unfaithful. The ritual was deeply personal. There was no large crowd, no public spectacle. It was a quiet communion between the seeker, the saint, and the mysterious movements of the creatures in the well. The unmarried girl might consult the well to know if she would marry soon, if a particular young man she admired returned her feelings, or if a marriage being arranged for her would be a happy one. She might sprinkle breadcrumbs on the water and watch to see if the eels consumed them, another sign of good fortune. Some accounts mention covering the well with a handkerchief. If it was disturbed when she returned, her wish for love would be granted. For these unmarried women, Saint Dwynwen's well offered a unique form of guidance and comfort. In a world where their futures were often decided by family arrangements or economic necessity, the chance to seek a supernatural sign, to feel a connection to a benevolent spiritual force who understood the pangs of love, was incredibly powerful. Provided a sense of agency, however small, in the daunting process of finding a life partner. The eels were not just eels. They were messengers, conduits of divine knowledge concerning the most pressing matter in a young woman's life. Pilgrimage to Landwyn and the consultation of the well was an act of faith and hope, a private festival of the heart for those on the threshold of love and marriage. While the belief in the prophetic eels has largely faded into folklore, Saint Dwynwen's Day continues to be celebrated, a testament to the enduring human desire for love and connection that once led unmarried Welsh girls to seek answers in the whispering waters of a sacred well. Number 2. The Klibbiga Jungfrun and the Embrace of Fate. Hidden in the folk traditions of rural Sweden, and likely similar practices existed in other parts of Scandinavia and Northern Europe, were localized rituals focused on very specific, often animate, natural objects, or specially created effigies believed to hold power over an unmarried girl's marital destiny. One such fascinating, though now largely forgotten, tradition involved what could be termed the Klibbiga Jungfrun, or Sticky Maiden ritual. This wasn't a large public festival, but rather a clandestine, often nocturnal, personal quest undertaken by young, unmarried women on a particular auspicious night, such as Midsummer's Eve or another significant date in the folk calendar. The goal was simple, yet profound: to perform a specific action with a designated tree, stone, or effigy that would magically ensure a swift and happy marriage. Picture a young woman, perhaps in her late teens, her heart a mixture of daring and trepidation. She has heard the village elders whisper about the klibbiga Jungfrun, perhaps a particular ancient tree in the nearby forest, known for its weeping sap, or a specially carved wooden figure kept by a wise woman, or even a prominent, oddly shaped rock on the edge of the village lands. The stickiness could be literal from sap or symbolic, representing the act of sticking or attaching oneself to a future husband. On the chosen night, under the cloak of darkness or the ethereal light of the midnight sun during summer, she would venture out, often alone or with a trusted friend who shared her quest. The ritual itself varied by local tradition. If it involved a sap-weeping tree, the unmarried girl might need to embrace it tightly, hoping some of its magical stickiness would transfer to her, thereby making her sticky or attractive to suitors. Ensuring one would soon stick to her in marriage, she might whisper her desires to the tree, naming the qualities she sought in a husband, or even the name of a specific young man she hoped to win. Sometimes, pins or small ribbons were to be stuck into the bark of the tree, each pin representing a hope or a step towards matrimony. The act of successfully embedding the pin was crucial. In other variations, the klibbiga Jungfrun might be a specially prepared effigy, perhaps a simple wooden doll or a figure made of straw representing a symbolic bride or a spirit of marriage. Unmarried girls would approach this figure and attempt to stick pins into it or attach small pieces of cloth or thread to it. The belief was that by doing so, they were symbolically binding themselves to a future spouse or attracting matrimonial luck. The ease with which the pin entered the effigy, or whether it stayed firmly attached, could be seen as an omen. These were acts of sympathetic magic, the belief that influences or that an action performed on a symbolic object could influence reality. For the unmarried young woman, this was a proactive step she could take to influence her own future in a society where her choices regarding marriage might otherwise be limited. It was a moment of empowerment, a secret pact made with the unseen forces of nature or the supernatural world. The atmosphere would have been charged with a sense of mystery and magic. The rustling leaves of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the hooch of an owl, all would seem like potent signs and portents. The insights these rituals offered were not just about finding any husband, but about actively participating in the cosmic dance of fate and fortune. It was a recognition that marriage was not just a social contract, but also touched by the numinous, by forces beyond the everyday. By engaging with the klibbiga Jungfrun, the unmarried girl was not passively waiting for her fate. She was attempting to woo it, to charm it, to stick to it. This festival, though private and often solitary, was a deeply significant event in her personal journey towards marriage. Connected her to generations of women before her who had performed similar rites, whispered similar hopes into the night air. As beliefs in folk magic waned with the rise of modernity and changing social structures, such intimate and specific rituals targeting the unmarried gradually faded from common practice, becoming quaint footnotes in folklore collections. Their potent pertnotes mean for young women seeking love largely forgotten by the wider world. Number 1. Babylon's astonishing bridal auction block. Of all the ancient customs designed to address the state of being unmarried, perhaps none is as startling or as directly targeted at orchestrating marriage as the Babylonian marriage market, vividly described by the Greek assayer Herodotus in the 5th century CE. This was not a festival of celebration for the unmarried in the joyous sense, nor was it a subtle ritual of divination. Instead, it was a highly organized public and rather pragmatic annual event where unmarried young women of marriageable age were systematically auctioned off to prospective husbands. It stands as a stark example of a societal mechanism exclusively focused on transitioning women from unmarried to married status, with profound implications for all involved. Herodotus, known as the father of history, recounts this practice as occurring in every village in Babylonia once a year. Imagine the scene: a designated public space, perhaps the village square, or a marketplace bustling with activity. On a specific day, all the unmarried girls who had reached a marriageable age were gathered together. They weren't there by choice in the modern sense. Their participation was an expectation, a communal process. The men of the village, bachelors or widowers seeking wives, would also assemble. Proceedings would begin with the auctioneer, a village official or crier, bringing forward the most beautiful girl first. He would call for bids, and the assembled men would offer sums of money. The most beautiful, and therefore considered the most desirable, would fetch the highest price from a wealthy suitor. She would be sold to the highest bidder, the money going not to her family, but into a common fund. After the most beautiful girl was auctioned, the auctioneer would proceed to the next most beautiful, and so on, working his way down the line in order of perceived attractiveness. This is where the system revealed its unique, and to Herodotus, rather wise feature. Once all the conventionally beautiful girls had been auctioned off, and a considerable sum of money collected from their salles, the auctioneer would then bring forward the plainer girls, or those who perhaps had some physical disadvantage. For these young women, the auction process was reversed. The auctioneer would announce how much money from the fund generated by the sale of the beautiful girls he was willing to offer as a dowry to any man who would agree to marry one of them. The man who agreed to take a less favored girl for the smallest sum of dowry would be awarded her as his wife, along with the money. In this way, Herodotus explains, the beautiful girls effectively provided dowries for their less comely sisters, ensuring that all young women in the village were married off. The money from the wealthy men buying beautiful brides was redistributed to help poorer men marry less sought-after women. For the unmarried young women, this annual event must have been an experience of intense public scrutiny and profound vulnerability. To be lined up, evaluated purely on physical appearance, and then assigned to a husband based on an economic transaction is a concept alien and unsettling to modern sensibilities. The most beautiful might have felt a certain triumph, yet also the pressure of being a prized commodity. Those deemed less attractive faced the public acknowledgement of this judgment, though the system did ensure they too found husbands and were provided with a dowry. Security came at the price of a potentially humiliating public process. The unmarried men, on the other hand, participated as active agents, bidders in a market. For the wealthy, it was a chance to acquire a beautiful wife. For the poorer men, it was an opportunity to gain both a wife and a much-needed sum of money. Herodotus admired this system for its practicality and its aim to ensure no young woman remained unmarried or without a dowry. He noted that fathers were not allowed to give their daughters in marriage to whomever they pleased, nor could the man who bought a girl take her away without first giving security that he would indeed marry her. This suggests a level of regulation designed to prevent abuse and ensure the system's primary goal, the formation of new marital households. This festival of marriage, if one can call it that, was a deeply ingrained societal institution, a cornerstone of how Babylonian society managed the transition of its youth into married life. It was efficient, comprehensive, and left little room for romantic love as a primary basis for union focusing, instead on communal obligation and economic redistribution. This extraordinary practice, so different from modern conceptions of courtship and marriage, eventually faded into the mists of time as Babylonian civilization itself declined and other cultural norms took precedence, leaving us with Herodotus's fascinating and somewhat unsettling account of a world where the path from unmarried to married was paved by the auction block.